Susan Sue Terskiewicz was born February 15, 1965 in Massachusetts to Marlene and Ronald, and was described as intelligent and determined with a heart of gold. She went to art school and dreamed of becoming a cartoonist from an early age and liked to collect Snoopy artifacts. At the age of 27, Sue was a Northwest Airlines ramp supervisor at Logan International Airport in Boston and only the second female ground service employee working for the airline. She was also the first woman promoted to her supervisor position and worked in a field dominated by men. The men she worked with made it well known that they didn't like her working in the same field as them. She lived with her parents, but her busy work schedule of overnight and weekend shifts kept her out of the house while her family was usually home. On Saturday, September 12, 1992, was scheduled to work the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Her mother Marlene said earlier that day, Sue seemed frustrated and impatient and mentioned before she left for work that she didn't want to go because she knew her co-workers were going to give her a hard time. But she had to go anyways. During her shift around 1 a.m., Sue offered to go out and buy sandwiches for her co-workers, and after leaving she was never seen again. Strangely, when she never returned that night, none of her co-workers reported her missing. However, they did punch her time card at the end of her shift. Sunday, September 13th, came and went without anyone reporting having seen her. Her mother says Sue was supposed to be at a baby shower that day with other co-workers, but she never showed up. Once again, no one reported her missing to police or to her family. On Monday, September 14th, the manager of a nearby auto body shop arrived to work and noticed an oddly parked blue Toyota Tercel in the shop's parking lot. Upon investigating, he noticed a pool of blood under the trunk of the car. He quickly called police, and when they arrived and popped the trunk, they found Sue's body. Police say she was also found with the money she was going to use to buy her co-workers sandwiches. Meanwhile, her mother arrived at the police station to report Sue missing. She was told the police chief wanted to talk to her, and that's when she was told the horrific news. At first, her family assumed that she was the victim of a random attack of violence, but in late 1993, her mother Marlene found her diary and was shocked at what was written in it. It told of sexual harassment, threatening graffiti in the men's room and cargo holds, and other incidents that happened to her while working for Northwest Airlines. Marlene was certain that it had something to do with her daughter's murder. In one incident in April of 1989, a coworker named Robert Brooks, who went by Bobby, damaged her radio twice. The two had briefly dated, and there were no issues until Sue began dating someone else. In one incident, Brooks stormed into the break room, picked up her radio and smashed it for no apparent reason in front of her other coworkers and would later threaten her. Sue asked her boyfriend to talk to Bobby about getting her a new radio. When she spoke to Bobby again, he threatened to kill her boyfriend. She filed several complaints to the airline and her union, but little was done about it. Instead, her superiors assigned her extra tasks, such as cleaning bathrooms and such, in response to her complaints. The harassment by her male coworkers also worsened after her complaints. For instance, she received several anonymous phone calls with the caller threatening to hurt her. Also, on several occasions, she and her boyfriend's cars were vandalized. Friends and coworkers who supported her also had their cars vandalized. Sue's diary only covered the first 8 months of her time at Northwest. However, several coworkers reported that the discrimination and harassment continued. In February of 1992, she was promoted to ramp supervisor, a position that was originally given to a male coworker. However, had learned that he had illegally bid for the job and filed a grievance. After an investigation, she won and received the position instead. Shortly after her promotion, Sue found a graffiti drawing of a coffin with her name on it in her locker. She would often get calls in the middle of the night, and at one point even her sister's vehicle was vandalized. The harassment had gotten so bad that someone urinated in her locker. Despite this, she continued to work harder and refused to let them run her off or stand in her way. She and her coworker, Deborah, were involved in a meeting with Northwest that did not go well. During the meeting, became upset and started to cry, and Deborah was concerned about the emotional toll that the harassment was causing in Sue's life. She told Deborah that she was scared, but did not elaborate on who she was scared of. Deborah believes that Sue was truly terrified for her life. The harassment continued, and then came September 12th when she mysteriously disappeared after leaving work to pick up food for her crew. Surprisingly, it would take a day and a half for her coworkers to report her missing. When she was later found dead, police suspected that her death may have been connected to a federal investigation of Northwest Airlines that took place in the summer preceding her murder. Beginning months before her murder, there was an investigation into a multi-million-dollar scam coming out of the Northwest terminal she worked in. It is believed that the persons behind the scam believed Sue was the one who blew the whistle on them. Some of the baggage handlers that she worked with were operating a stolen credit card ring. When shipments of new cards were transported by Northwest jets, they would steal them and either sell them or use them for themselves. 10 of them were later arrested and convicted, some of which were named by her in her diary. Sue's family later settled a sexual harassment lawsuit with Northwest Airlines. Before Sue left work to go get the sandwiches on the night she vanished, she received a phone call from an unidentified person who wanted to meet her. Her family believes that the call was from someone Sue trusted who lured her to a meeting with her killer. Two prime suspects in the case are two of Sue's co-workers, Joseph Nuzzo and Robert Brooks, also known as Bobby, two people she had several problems with. Nuzzo had threatened Sue after she broke up a fight between him and another employee. As a result, he was suspended from work for 6 months. He blamed Sue for this and keyed her car, slashed her tires, staked out her house, made anonymous telephone calls, and told others that he would exact revenge. Shortly after Nuzzo returned to work, they would start up the scam that would ultimately lead to their downfall. In August of 1992, several baggage handlers were subpoenaed by a grand jury, and Nuzzo allegedly believed that Sue had told the police about the scheme. 2 days later, he was fired, and only a few weeks after his firing, Sue was found dead. He was a crew chief at the airport and led the theft ring and would later be convicted for the scam. Nuzzo Brooks and another worker named Edward Flaherty were among 35 people indicted in the massive credit card theft operation. Flaherty pleaded guilty to stealing credit cards from mail shipments from about April 1991 until July 1992 to pay off gambling debts and feed it cocaine habit. Not surprising, these 3 men were also the men who had been allegedly harassing Sue. Brooks moved out of the area prior to the murder and cooperated with police and later pleaded guilty to theft and fraud charges. However, he was later charged with lying to a federal grand jury. He claimed that he was working in another state on the night of Sue's murder and that he didn't talk to Nuzzo on the day of Sue's murder. Both statements were proven to be false. There is no evidence that Sue was involved in helping with the investigation, and her family believes that Sue didn't even know about it until she read about it in the newspaper. Nuzzo and Brooks remain suspects in her murder, along with Sue's other co-workers at Northwest. A $250,000 reward is being offered by her family for an arrest in the case, which as of today remains open and unsolved. Wesley Keith Billingsley was born August 17, 1993, and went by Wes. He graduated from San Diego State University in 2016 with a degree in business administration and marketing. According to his Facebook page, he is the founder of BAM Enterprise, which appears to be a public relations agency, and co-founder of On Deck, which appears to be a lifestyle brand focusing on apparel, accessories, music, and events. He was originally from Sacramento, California, and moved back there for a short time after college and before returning to San Diego. He was described as free-spirited, positive, happy, and liked to make people smile. In 2018, at the age of 24, he had been working at an advertising agency but lost his job. Unable to make rent, he would lose his apartment and be forced to stay back and forth between 3 friends' homes in the Pacific Beach neighborhood. The friends lived on Haines Street, Diamond Street, and Grand Avenue. According to police, Pacific Beach is one of San Diego's high-crime neighborhoods. He never told his mother, Crystal, about his current living situation, and she was under the impression that he was still working at the ad agency and living with his roommates in his previous apartment. On June 12, 2018, he would go missing and would never be seen again. He was supposed to meet with friends on June 13th to help them move, but never showed up. It was discovered that on June 12th, his phone was turned off or went dead and all social media interactions ceased, which is very unusual for him. Also that day, he drove by the Vons store, a place he frequented, and saw someone he knew. He would smile, wave, and keep driving. This is most likely the last person to see Wes. 2 months after his disappearance, his black Ford Expedition was found abandoned on a city street in the South Bay area of San Diego near the border of Mexico. Some of his personal belongings were still inside the vehicle, but there was no sign of him. It wasn't uncommon for people to park near the border and take a cab into Mexico, but it was uncommon for someone to do this alone, especially without telling anyone. However, there was no official evidence that he crossed the border that day. His mom later filed a missing persons report in Mexico. She also checked the jails and morgues but found nothing. His mother, Crystal, who lives in Sacramento, has repeatedly returned to San Diego to spread the word about her son's disappearance and beg for information. It is of note that Wes has 8 tattoos on various places on his body and could easily be identified by this. She also wants people to remember that Crime Stoppers has a 100% anonymous tip line, which accepts tips via their app, phone number, or online using the web tip process. The tip line does not utilize caller ID and conversations are not recorded. The tip line is operated by Crime Stoppers and is not under law enforcement control. His mother remains devastated, and as of today, Wes has never been found and this case remains unsolved. Brittney Shante Robinson was born January 27, 1998 to Dimitri Cooper and Tiana Ho. Her parents would later separate and Brittney would live with her mother full-time in Mobile, Alabama. Brittney and Dimitri would occasionally spend some time together as she was growing up, but these occasions were few and far between. Dimitri had allegedly struggled over the years with drug addiction and schizophrenia and had been charged at some point with domestic violence and assaulting a police officer. On June 14, 2012, her mother reluctantly agreed to allow 14-year-old Brittney to go to Dimitri's home for 2 days in Dawes, Alabama. Her aunt, Dimitri's sister, dropped her off at his house at 9 a.m. and sadly, Brittney would never be seen again. After not hearing from or seeing her daughter, Tiana called the police who went to his house, but Dimitri and Brittney were gone. A warrant was put out for his arrest a few weeks later for custodial interference. When she went missing, Dimitri had left Alabama and went to Memphis, Tennessee. And then on July 7th, he took a bus from Tennessee to Arkansas, where police would find him in September at a mental health facility. While traveling around, Demetrius reportedly hustled money off people by pretending to be a homeless person to get train and bus tickets. Upon being arrested, he told police that he did not know where Brittney was, but he did have her pink iPod on his person, along with a rope and knife. He changed his story once he was in custody, stating that he knew where she was and that she was safe, but wouldn't tell anyone where she was. He would change his story once again, stating that she'd never even come to see him. Meanwhile, he would continue to state that he would never hurt his daughter. Police would search his home in Mobile, but found no clues as to her whereabouts. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison for custodial interference in August 2014 and only served a few years before being released on good behavior terms. His attorney claimed Dimitri wouldn't actually give up any information whatsoever about what happened to Brittney and threatened suicide all the time to get his way. Tiana said that he showed no concern or care regarding Brittney when she visited him in prison. Brittney's family created a Facebook page dedicated to finding her called Bring Brittney Shante Robinson Home. In 2019, Dimitri offered to tell someone in the group what happened to Brittney and asked this person to meet him in person. However, he never showed up as planned. He also sent this person a meme of the Joker in a prison uniform with the caption, "Don't get on my bad side." Brittney was supposed to begin her freshman year at Murphy High School in the fall of 2012 and had signed up for advanced placement courses. Demetrius allegedly lives in Florida now, and as of today, Brittney has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Colin Gillis was born March 4, 1994, to John and Patricia and grew up in a small logging town named Tupper Lake, New York, surrounded by the Adirondack Mountains. He was described as gifted academically, having a great sense of humor, and liked to have fun. He graduated from Tupper Lake High School in 2011 with honors, where he played basketball and football. He then began his first year at the State University of New York at Brockport, lived in a dorm, and planned to attend medical school. On March 10, 2012, 18-year-old Colin was home from college on spring break in his close-knit hometown of Tupper Lake and was looking forward to reuniting with friends from high school. He would start the night by going to his friend's house, who lived just down the street from him. He would then get a ride with a group of friends to a house on Lincoln Avenue. It's unclear if he and his friends had made actual plans for the evening, but at some point, they decided to head to a party about 5 miles away on past Gunga May Road. This would be the worst decision of the night because not only were they not friends with this group, they were not even invited. While at the party, an argument broke out and Colin's 9 friends decided it would be best to leave, but Colin himself refused to go. His friends could not figure out why he was so adamant about staying, but they weren't going to stick around to find out and left. With his friends gone, was left with a group of people he barely knew and some he didn't know at all. Police stated that the party would eventually break up around 1:30 a.m. However, it's unclear if the earlier fight had anything to do with this, but it is believed that more than one fight broke out that night and Colin may have been involved in at least one of them. This is strange because Colin was described as a non-confrontational person, and it is unclear how much he had to drink that night, if any. After the party broke up, he called a few friends to pick him up, leaving voicemails, but no one answered, so he began walking. And instead of going right towards his home, he went left on foot, walking along the dark highway on Route 3 towards Piercefield. Right after leaving the party around 1:30 a.m., 2 teens stopped and asked if he wanted a ride, but he declined. He was then seen walking west near the area of Setting Pole Dam Road on Route 3 at 1:45 a.m. A local named Austin later stated that he rode by Colin and asked him twice if he could give him a ride, but he declined, stating a friend was on the way to pick him up. However, there was no evidence that anyone was planning to pick him up. Austin would later be the subject of rumors in the small town as being involved in his disappearance. At some point, a passing motorist saw someone who fit Colin's description walking along the highway without a coat and acting strangely. He was concerned, as it is not the kind of road you would expect to see a pedestrian on in the middle of the night without a coat in the freezing temperatures. The motorist drove a few miles to the police department and reported him out of concern. He stated he didn't feel comfortable stopping and was returning from a trip with his mother in the car. Strangely, the man also reported that the young man was flailing his arms and he at first thought he was a hitchhiker, but then it looked like he wasn't. About 30 minutes later, State Trooper checked the area and found no one. Colin was at the party with his orange LL Bean backpack that had a reversible jacket inside. However, these items have never been located and it is unknown why he wasn't wearing his jacket when the passerby saw him. His parents reported him missing the next evening when he didn't return home. A massive 4-day search ensued involving hundreds of volunteers, police, search and rescue, and forest rangers, as well as high-tech sonar equipment and a dive team. The temperature was reportedly in the teens the night he went missing. Investigators say Colin's driver's license and a tobacco pipe was found near Franklin, St. Lawrence County line, just feet away from where he was last seen. Colin's phone was last used at 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, March 11th, the morning he disappeared. There was snow on the ground, and no signs of a struggle or accident could be seen, and there was no evidence suggesting that he was the victim of a hit and run. Sadly, the case would go cold. 8 years after he disappeared, in November of 2020, a dig was performed on a property that was known to locals in the nearby town of Edwards as the Old Noble Farm. It was located over 50 miles from where Colin was last seen walking, but details about the search have not been released to the public. This was possibly related to rumors about 2 brothers named Austin and Nathan being involved in their family owning the land that was searched. The farmhouse located on the property has since burned down and Austin passed away in September of 2021. Colin's family and police believe that someone out there has information but is afraid of coming forward. The investigation is still ongoing, but as of today, this case remains unsolved. Teresa Corley was born June 1, 1959 to Pauline and Thomas and was one of 9 children. She was described as upbeat, positive, friendly, and attractive and was nicknamed Terry. At the age of 19, she lived in Bellingham, Massachusetts, and was in her second year at Holliston Junior College and had dreams of working in the medical field. On the night of December 5, 1978, Terry and her friends were celebrating the birthday of Terry's boyfriend, and they all wound up partying at the train stop lounge on Depot Street in the nearby town of Franklin. She and her boyfriend would get into an argument, leaving her upset and wanting to leave. So at around 4 a.m., she would leave angry, upset, and intoxicated. Some reports say that no one in her group noticed she left, nor did they go after her. Other reports say that they refused to give her a ride, so she then attempted to hitchhike, which was not unusual for her. 3 men called up to her after she left the bar and would take her to the Presidential Arms Apartments on West Central Street in Franklin. It is believed she was then sexually assaulted by the 3 men. She asked them to let her go and quickly dressed and mistakenly put on one of her shoes and one of the men's shoes. Terry fled the apartment and attempted to make her way to her home in Bellingham, about 3 miles away. This is when she was picked up by a truck driver in the early morning hours. He would describe her as incoherent at times and had indicated she had been sexually assaulted and appeared very angry. He dropped her off just outside of Bellingham Police Station about 5 a.m., thinking she would go in but didn't wait to see. She was then seen about 5:30 a.m. by witnesses on Main Street near Dairy Queen heading in the direction of her home. That morning, her mother awoke and realized Terry had not come home, which was something she had never done before. At this point, her mother, 2 sisters, and friends began searching for her. Allegedly, one of the attackers that night by the name of Steve had gone into the Alpine Place apartments where Terry's boyfriend lived and claimed he was looking for someone. He has been questioned by police numerous times over the years, but has not revealed any details. Interestingly enough, his uncle was a Franklin police detective, and allegedly Steve reached out to his uncle immediately after Terry went missing. 3 days after she was last seen, a businessman from Connecticut by the name of John Burlington called the police station's business line to report that he had pulled off to the side of the road to relieve himself and had seen a nude woman's body. Sadly, she was found strangled to death off the northbound lane of Interstate 495 on the Bellingham-Medway town line. Strangely, police would discover that John Burlington, the person who reported the body, didn't even exist in Connecticut. They believed the person was actually a Bellingham resident and had given a false name. John Burlington's real identity has never been discovered. And as for the men who officials say allegedly assaulted Terry on her last night of life, were questioned but never charged with any crime in relation to the case. In 2018, Terry's body was exhumed in hopes of obtaining a DNA sample. A state police chemist collected 9.5 fingernails to analyze for DNA in hopes of identifying the person responsible for her murder. However, the samples were too degraded to produce a full DNA profile, but male DNA was found on her jeans but has not been matched to any suspects. According to her sister, there were several key pieces of evidence in Terry's case that were either lost or accidentally destroyed. As of today, her sexual attackers have never been arrested, nor has her murderer been found, and this case remains unsolved. 26-year-old Erica Crippen Crosby lived in Mount Laurel with her family. After losing her mother when she was 13, her 2 aunts had raised her, and the 3 of them were extremely close. Family was everything to Erica, and everybody said that being a mother was her favorite thing in the whole world. She had a daughter, Amira, from a past relationship of almost a decade, and a 3-month-old baby girl, Kaylee, with her new husband, Kyle Crosby. Erica's family said that Kyle loved Amira like she was his own, and the family dynamic seemed perfect. Erica's friends said that she was funny, animated, smart and sassy, exaggerating everything she did and making jokes at her own expense just to make everyone laugh. She loved to entertain and be social, but she also enjoyed quiet nights in with her young daughters. As well as being a busy mother, she was working hard on achieving her dream of becoming a doctor, as well as working in a hospice caring for people. She was always on the go, never slowing down and always pushing and challenging herself. Erica and her husband of almost a year, Kyle, had actually known each other since school, but started speaking properly years later in 2012. He reached out her on Facebook, and the spark was instant. Erica said she loved his ambition. When they started dating, he was really driven and hardworking, and this matched her personality well. He was the founder of a fitness company, and the pair loved working out together. 2 years after meeting, they married and moved into a new apartment. Erica soon found out she was pregnant with twins, and the pair were over the moon. Erica's uncle said, "The white picket fence and the puppy, that's all they were missing." Tragically, however, one of the twins didn't survive, but little Kaylee did, and Erica called her miracle princess. Several months would pass, and the cracks were beginning to show in the couple's relationship. Erica and Kyle were definitely not without their issues. Kyle had started using a lot of drugs and would disappear frequently. Erica was forever trying to get him to stop and be present with his family, but the minute things seemed to get better, they would go back to how they were shortly after. The police had been called to the house several times for domestic disturbances, but it had never gone any further in the way of charges. Erica eventually put her savings towards paying for rehab for him, and everyone said that although she was trying her best to help and get their family back to how it was, she was mentally and physically exhausted. December 30th, 2014. Erica had a tradition that New Year's Eve was always spent with her girls, so Kyle and Erica decided to go out and celebrate the night before, having a nice meal and some drinks. Erica documented everything about her life online, and at around 11 p.m., she uploaded a photo of the couple to Facebook and set it as her profile picture. They were smiling and happy, enjoying their evening together. The next day, on what was New Year's Eve, Erica's Aunt Sonia answered the phone to Kyle. He told her that Erica was going out again, and he asked if she could help watch the children. She said this was strange, knowing it was Erica's tradition to spend the evening in with her family, and everyone she would normally have gone out with hadn't heard from her. Kyle phoned back later saying that everything was fine and she didn't need to come over anymore. Several hours passed and Erica's uncle got another call from Kyle. Kyle said he was getting worried as he had phoned Erica several times but was getting no answer. Her family started trying to call her too, but they were also met with silence. The hours ticked by into New Year's Day, and when her aunts got no text or call from Erica to wish them a happy new year, they knew something was wrong. January 2nd, 2015. Kyle posted a status to Facebook asking if someone could look after the girls. Surprisingly, Erica's family then received a couple of texts from Erica's phone, but something about them didn't sit right with them. They all had an instant, uneasy feeling, as the messages did not read or sound like her at all. She was still not answering her phone when it rang, and her social media was a ghost town. She posted every single day without fail where she was, what she was doing, and tagging who she was with. Everything from her daily workouts and how many assignments she had to do to her late-night snacks. But since her post a day before New Year's Eve, there was no activity whatsoever. When Amira wasn't collected from school and the police were called to do a welfare check, everybody felt sick to their stomachs. On January 7th, when officers arrived at the couple's apartment, they found baby Kaylee alone in the bathtub, fully clothed in a soiled diaper. Police immediately suspected there was improper childcare going on. Family members then turned up at the apartment too and said that it was in total disarray. There was a smashed window and broken glass on the floor. Food and rubbish scattered around. Furniture was overturned and everything was everywhere. Erica's purse and keys were still inside, and despite the freezing cold temperatures, her coats were all there too. Everybody said she would have been horrified at the state of her home. There was no way she would walk away from the children, and not a chance that she would leave them in an apartment like that. Kyle was sat on a chair and he appeared to be high on something. Given the state of the home and little Kaylee in the bathtub, the police asked Kyle to come in and make a statement. Amira's father, Hameen, came and picked her up, and Kaylee was taken in by Kyle's mom, Jo. Hameen said that Amira was very smart and perceptive, and it was heartbreaking to know that she knew something bad had happened to her mother, but, the same as everyone else, she had no idea what. At the police station, Kyle wasn't really making any sense and told officers that he had taken some painkillers. He told them he hadn't actually seen his wife since New Year's Day. He tried to get in contact with her, but to no avail, and he had no idea where she might be. He filed a missing persons report and the search got underway. As well as the detectives, Erica's family and friends were conducting their own investigation. In the harshest and coldest conditions, and through all hours of the day and night, they looked for her. Her best friend even quit her job so she could spend every day searching for her. Given everything that they knew about Erica, her constant communication, her presence as a loving mother, her social media updates, and her keys and purse being at home, authorities informed the family that things had escalated fast and they were now treating her case as homicide. A few days later, police returned to the couple's apartment and realized that Kyle was gone, and so was Erica's 4 tourists. They tracked down Kyle's mother, Jo, hoping she would be able or willing to tell them where he was. Perhaps he was out looking as well, or maybe he'd gone to work. She was open and forthcoming, saying she hadn't actually spoken to Hassan in a week, and as well as Erica, she was concerned for his safety too, given the stress he was under. And Kyle's boss confirmed that he hadn't been in work for a couple of days, which was unlike him. One of Erica's aunts used the Find My app to see if she could get hold of Erica's last location according to her phone. This led everyone to a restaurant, but after looking in the bins outside and around the area, they determined that neither she nor her phone was there. Her cousin Barbara begged the manager to let them watch the CCTV, but there was no sign of Erica on any of the cameras. There was some footage of Kyle, Kaylee, and Amira from a few days before. The tapes were handed over to the detectives, who at this point were seeing red flags everywhere. They knew that Kyle had something to hide. He had been evasive from the start and his story kept on changing. They also learned that Kyle was now out on a drugs binge with a sex worker whom he had brought back to the couple's apartment. According to sources, he even told her she could go through Erica's wardrobe and take whatever she wanted. Police didn't have enough to arrest him on suspicion of murder, but they did have enough to file charges against him for child endangerment. On January 10, 2015, given the state of the apartment and the way the girls had seemingly been left to fend for themselves for 8 days, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Fortunately for the team, Detective Rayner, who was heading the investigation, received an unexpected call. It was Kyle's father, and he said that his son had called them off of a random number that morning. He handed the number over, and this pointed police to a convenience store in Maryland. Using this location, they managed to get a hit on Erica's car license plate. It had been seen driving down the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Finally, they were narrowing in on Kyle Crosby. BOLO, otherwise known as a B on the lookout, was put out for the car. An off-GT police officer driving around Maryland soon spotted the car with Kyle driving it. He attempted to pull him over, but before he could do anything, Kyle jumped out of the car and ran off. After police caught up to him, he was officially charged with 2 counts of child endangerment. They seized the Ford Taurus and a forensic examination began on it. Police uncovered several items from inside that they believed had significant evidentiary value. Duct tape, a shovel, a bag of cement, and several used air freshener canisters. They now believed that they had enough circumstantial evidence to charge Kyle Crosby with the murder of his wife. He was held on a $1 million bond. But they still didn't have Erica's body, and they had no idea where she might be. After looking in the glove box of the car, they found a GPS device, and the hope was if this was plugged in, the data would be able to tell them where he went and when. The GPS device contained over 8,000 points over a few hundred miles. These points showed where the vehicle had come to a stop. Detective Rayner said it was essentially like digital breadcrumbs being dropped. They limited down the points to anywhere the vehicle had stopped for 10 minutes or longer, believing that if Kyle had moved and left Erica's body somewhere, it was likely it would have taken longer than a few minutes. Going through everything and eliminating certain points was a mammoth task, and while the team worked on this, Kyle's phone was also looked at. They found 15 messages between him and his mother, Jo, that had been deleted. Detective Rayner said the messages were disturbing, to say the least. On December 31st, the day police believed that something had happened to Kyle was actually texting his mother in real time as a fight between the pair was going on. At 3:20 a.m., a message from his mother read, "Please do not touch her in any way or form." 13 minutes later, Kyle replied and said, "I'm not that stupid." For hours later, at around 7 a.m., Jo's phone had pinged off of a tower near to the couple's apartment. Jo hadn't mentioned any of this to the police, and she was asked to come to the station and explain it. She bluntly told them if they checked her phone, they would find many more deleted messages between her and her son. She said she assumed they would have already found them and didn't feel the need to mention it. Police were convinced that she knew what had happened and was trying to help her son cover it up. Joe Crosby was also charged with tampering with evidence. She was held on a $12,500 bail, but posted 10% of it and was let out. The data on the GPS device was being looked at alongside Google Maps and Street View to see if any of the points looked like somewhere Kyle might have tried to hide Erica's body. One spot caught their attention right away. It was in the middle of Maryland near a long country road, a quiet rural area amidst a forest. Kyle's car had stopped there for 5 minutes one night, and then for 14 minutes a couple of nights later. Just a short walk away from the road the car had stopped on, Erica's body was found under some branches. She was wrapped in a blanket, her arms, legs and neck were bound with electrical cord, and duct tape was across her mouth and nose. Although the cold weather had often hindered the search, police were now actually grateful for it. Despite detectives thinking she had likely been dead since New Year's Eve, her body was well preserved, as was any evidence around her, and this was all down to the freezing temperatures and the snow. After a lengthy time for the family, just waiting for some sort of conclusion to the case, it was announced that Kyle Crosby would plead guilty. In December 2015, he pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter and hindering apprehension. As part of his plea deal, his mother's charges were dropped, as were the charges of child endangerment. Detective Rayner said he wanted to believe Kyle's tears were genuine, but he couldn't help but think they were more for himself than anyone else. After he was sentenced, Erica's Aunt Sonia said, "We can finally move on. We can just be there picking up the pieces for the children." Today, he really showed remorse. He did care for her. He did love her in some way. Erica's cousin said the best thing anyone could do following this was maybe take something away from it. Be honest with their loved ones and let them help you, she said. There's signs in the beginning of relationships. Act on those signs and don't be afraid to leave, she said. Erica's oldest daughter, Amira, now lives with her father, Hameen, and Erica's aunt, Sonia, and uncle, Kanye, adopted Kaylee. Her Aunt Sonia said that Erica told her that if anything were to happen to her, she wanted to be cremated and put into lockets so that her daughters could wear her close to their hearts. Erica's family never gave up and were relentless in their efforts to find Erica and the truth. Detective Rayner said, "I've been a homicide detective for almost 10 years, and it's rare that I've ever experienced a family as involved in looking for their missing loved one as Erica's family was. I have a lot of respect for them, and I'll never forget that grit and that tenacity that they showed in trying to find Erica." Erica was a loving, hard-working mother, giving everything she could to her children, husband, and family, dedicating so much to her dreams of one day being a doctor. Barbara said she feels like Erica is never far away, and that's thanks partly to how much her daughters are like her. She said, "Amira remembers a lot. More and more every day she's looking like her. She laughs like her. It's like having Erica back in the house." The city of Eureka in Humboldt County, California is sometimes referred to as the heart of the U.S. Redwood Coast. However, on the downside, when compared to other locations with comparable populations, Eureka is ranked among the most dangerous cities in the nation. Eureka has a violent crime rate of 38.4, which is higher than the 22.7 national average. The town of Eureka was completely devastated by a horrifying crime that occurred there back in 1997. Slightly north of Eureka, in the Deep Ryan Slough, a duck hunter found the severed torso of a woman on October 26, 1997. After notifying the Humboldt County Sheriff Department, an investigation into the matter was started right away. The torso had been stabbed 27 times and was cut down the middle, and the head, arms, legs, and breasts had all been chopped off. The detectives tried numerous times to identify the victim, but were never successful. Nevertheless, they estimated that the woman was between 18 and 25 years old, did not smoke, and had previously given birth. For a little while, this reduced the number on their list, but there was no luck. While the investigation to identify the slain woman continued, a little over 2 months later, in January 1998, an arm of a female body was found and recovered on Clam Beach, which is about 20 miles north of the Ryan Slough. The arm was found to belong to the same woman whose remains were found near Eureka. Her head, another arm, and some of her legs were still missing though. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Department put in a lot of overtime and effort to identify the victim, but it appeared to be an insurmountable task, given the lack of clues and the severely decomposed state of the remains. Months passed with virtually no development in the case. The woman's identity was still unknown, but as 1998 drew to a close, a startling twist in the case caught the investigator off guard and fundamentally changed the direction of the investigation. Wayne Adam Ford, then 36, entered the main Humboldt County Sheriff Department station on Tuesday, November 3, 1998, with the intention of making an odd confession. Rodney Calvin Ford, Wayne's brother, was also present. While the detectives searched him, Wayne was found to be in possession of a woman's severed body part that was sealed in a Ziploc bag. Wayne stopped trying to hide anything, so he willingly cooperated with the officers. Wayne confessed to the detectives that he had committed several crimes and that he had killed 4 women in the North State, including the nameless woman whose body was discovered in the Ryan Slough in October 1997. Rodney informed the detectives that Wayne had called him on November 2, 1998, stating that he needed assistance with something. Wayne claimed he could no longer keep the secrets and that he wanted to turn himself in. Following Wayne's confession, Rodney persuaded him to come clean and turn himself in to the police while he attempted to piece together what his brother had done. Wayne told the detectives that he turned himself in because, had he not, he might have killed his ex-wife after admitting to killing 4 women. He refrained from acting solely out of a desire to spare his son from suffering. He expressed regret for the harm he had caused to all those women, and revealed that his evil actions were motivated by resentment toward his ex-wife, who was preventing Wayne from seeing their son. Wayne claimed that this infuriated him and caused him to act in heinous ways. Those who knew Wayne said he had been disappointed trying to see his son ever since he and his wife got separated and divorced. Wayne's visitation rights were severely restricted by the terms of his divorce from his ex-wife. On November 3, 1998, was taken into custody without any delay. Dennis Dewis, the sheriff of Humboldt County, spent 3.5 hours interviewing Wayne in an effort to get detailed information about his victims that would aid in their identification. Wayne claimed to have dismembered 3 of his victims and strangled the other one. Wayne listed 4 women who were hitchhikers. Wayne acknowledged that he had attacked each of them before mutilating and strangling them. Wayne reported to the police that on October 17, 1997, he picked up his first victim, whom he thought was a hitchhiker. He continued to describe the horrific events of that day, including how he had attacked her, strangled her, and then severed her body. The possibility that the woman Wayne was referring to be the one whose remains were discovered in October 1997 occurred to the detectives. However, did not seem to remember the name or face of that woman. During the course of the investigation, detectives searched places where Wayne had lived and discovered more remains that they believed belonged to the unidentified woman. The investigators also discovered that Wayne attempted to cook some of the unidentified woman's remains and stored them in his trailer's freezer for nearly a year. The woman's identity remained a mystery despite this information, and numerous body parts were still missing. Tina Renee Gibbs, a Las Vegas prostitute who is 28 years old, is the second victim that Wayne picked up sometime in 1998. Tina's naked body was discovered on June 2, 1998, in the California Aqueduct, close to the Kern County town of Buttonwillow. Tina was the only known victim of Wayne's that had not had her body severed. She had been strangled to death. In September 1998, for months after he had attacked and killed Tina, Wayne picked his third victim and struck again. This time he picked up a 25-year-old Fontana prostitute named Lynette Dion White next to an Ontario truck. On September 25, 1998, Lynette's nude body was found floating in a San Joaquin County irrigation canal. The exact cause of Lynette's death was still unknown, but it was thought to be homicidal violence with an unclear ideology. Wayne admitted to the detectives that he had paid Lynette to stay with him for a night the night she passed away. Wayne killed 29-year-old Patricia and Tamez less than a month later. She was his 4th and final victim before he turned himself in. On October 23, 1998, Patricia's naked body was discovered floating in the California aqueduct in San Bernardino County, close to Hesperia. One of her breasts had been chopped off and she had been strangled. When Wayne entered the police station to turn himself in, this was the body part he had been carrying in the Ziploc bag for over a week. Patricia was taken by Wayne from a convenience store, and similar to Tina, he paid her to stay the night. Sadly, Patricia also did not make it. Patricia's cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a possible thoracic spine fracture, as well as a broken neck beneath her shoulders. Wayne was being held at the Humboldt County Jail on murder charges with a $1 million bail. The detectives reported that Wayne was contrite and seemed to have come to a realization about his involvement in certain things in life. Wayne's past was investigated further by the authorities to see if he had been involved in any other killings. On December 3, 1961, Wayne Adam Ford was born in Petaluma, California. He was the second child born to an immigrant German mother and an American father. When he was 10 years old, his parents divorced, which had a lasting impact on his life and led him to enroll in the U.S. Marine Corps after dropping out of high school. Before receiving an honorable discharge in 1985, he served for 6 years. Wayne was struck by an inebriated driver in an accident that occurred in November of 1980. He suffered a head injury in the accident and spent 9 days in a coma. Wayne's family claims that following that incident, his personality underwent a significant transformation. Wayne began to experience psychological problems in 1983, and these problems only got worse over time, necessitating multiple hospital stays. Wayne received a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder not long afterward. Wayne had several run-ins with the law in the years that followed, including accusations that he had beaten and robbed a prostitute in Garden Grove, California, in 1986. He was taken into custody in 1990 on charges of animal abuse, and he spent a little time behind bars in San Clemente, California. Wayne was a bad husband to both of his wives, who eventually filed for divorce. After he had 2 marriages, Wayne worked as a long-haul truck driver and lived in a trailer park in Arcata, California. Between 1997 and 1998, the year of the murders, in a San Bernardino County court on June 27, 2006, Wayne was found guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder, and he received a death sentence in August of 2006. He is currently incarcerated in San Quentin State Prison in California on death row. Investigators never gave up trying to identify the unidentified female victim of Wayne over the years. In an effort to find leads, they frequently examined missing person reports from the entire West Coast. They even tried using DNA databases to try and identify her. The woman's DNA was added to the National Unidentified Persons DNA Index, as well as the California Missing Persons DNA database. The DNA profile was regularly compared in the combined index system with profiles of other remains and missing persons. Regretfully, there was never a profile match. The woman's identity was still a mystery. William Hansol, the sheriff of Humboldt County, established a cold case unit in 2021 and tasked 2 investigators with the sole responsibility of reviewing and examining their department's unresolved cases in search of fresh leads. In December 2022, the Humboldt County Sheriff Department collaborated with the California Department of Justice and Othram, a forensic genealogy lab, to investigate the possibility of using advanced forensic DNA testing to identify the unidentified woman or a close relative. Courtesy of detectives Othram received a DNA sample from the woman's preserved remains. Forensic genome sequencing was employed by Othram scientists to create a thorough DNA profile of the woman. By using this profile for forensic genealogy, the investigators were able to find a possible DNA match that took them to Kathy Cummings. Investigators speculated that Kathy may be a close relative of the woman who was never identified. The detectives got in touch with Kathy and inquired about any missing family members. According to her statement, Carrie and Cummings, her sister had vanished from the mid-1990s. The detectives asked Kathy about the last time she had any communication with Carrie. Pushing herself to focus more, Kathy remembered the last time she had seen her sister Carrie, which was in 1997. After obtaining a sample of Kathy's DNA, investigators compared it to the sample found on the deceased woman. At last, there was a match. The remains of Carey and Cummings were formally identified in June 2023. Carey was, as it turned out, only 25 years old when she was killed. Carey's identity had been unknown for 25 years, but it was no longer a mystery. To provide Carey's family some closure, the detectives contacted them and told them of Carey's tragic case. Carey's sister Kathy informed the detectives that although she was a lovely, intelligent, and humorous woman, she was suffering from an untreated mental illness. Before the family lost contact with her in 1997, she was couch surfing in Eugene, Oregon. Kathy claims that her family attempted to file a missing persons report for Carey in 1997 when she was reported missing in Oregon and Arizona. But for various reasons, the report was never filed. Carey's family was informed that she was an adult who had made her own lifestyle choices. There was nothing the police could do if she posed no threat to herself or others. Carey was never added to any national databases or listed as missing as a result of this. The investigators hoped that this identification would help provide some closure and peace of mind, even though they were aware that they could not ease Carey's family's suffering. In addition to giving them pride, Carey's case gave them hope that more cases like hers could be resolved with perseverance. The Humboldt County Coroner's Division is currently working to return Carey's remains to her family so that a fitting funeral and burial can take place. Wayne Adam Ford is still incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison on death row. While the detectives continue to be committed to reviewing cold cases in collaboration with Othram and the California Department of Justice. With a population of roughly 3,000, Provincetown is a small coastal resort town in Massachusetts, USA. It is well known for its harbor, beaches, artistic community, and tourism sector. The LGBT community also finds it to be a popular vacation spot. A 12-year-old girl who was following a barking dog made a horrifying discovery on July 26, 1974. In the Race Point Dunes, she discovered the decaying body of an unknown woman. Only a few yards from a road, the body was lying face down on half of a beach blanket. Under her head, there were Wrangler jeans and a blue bandana, and her long auburn or red hair was pulled back into a ponytail with a gold-flecked elastic band. The woman was almost severed to death, her toenails were painted pink, and there was no indication of a struggle. It was found that she had been crushed on one side of her head, most likely with a military-style entrenching tool. It was established that this head injury was the reason for her demise. Upon reaching the scene, the police were perplexed as to the identity of the woman, her journey here, and the identity of her killer. Tire tracks were discovered 50 yards from the scene, and 2 sets of footprints led to the body. According to police theories, the woman may have been asleep when she was killed, or she may have known her killer. The woman's features were ascertained by the police, who found that she weighed 66 kilograms, was of an athletic build, and stood about 5 to 6 inches tall. She was also in the age range of 25 to 40. She underwent pricey dental procedures, such as crowns, that could have cost $5,000 to $10,000. Still, a number of her teeth were extracted. In addition, one forearm and both of her hands were gone. At the time, some investigators thought the murderer had removed these body parts in an effort to conceal their own identity or the identity of the victim. The victim's face was crushed and disfigured, and her hands were missing, making fingerprints impossible to identify. Neither her body nor her inner garments contained any identification that the police could find. The case became even more difficult for the investigators because of this lack of evidence. Putting the murder victim's skull and teeth together was a task given to Dr. Stanley M. Schwartz, the state dental forensic examiner and head of diagnosis at Tufts University Dental School. He recreated the woman's teeth, jaw, and skull. A clay model of her features was made by forensic anthropologist Dr. Clyde Snow of the Federal Aviation Administration's Civil Air Medical Institute. In a last-ditch effort to find leads, images of the model and artist renderings of the sculpture were shared across the nation. In an attempt to identify the dentist who had completed the pricey dental work, authorities also contacted thousands of dentists and published articles about the case in police and detective magazines, as well as dental journals. Although dental records were provided, none of them matched. James J. Meads, the chief of Provincetown Police, was committed to cracking the case of the unidentified woman. In an effort to spark interest and collect leads, he made appearances on network television and in national magazines. He also made a lot of trips in pursuit of every lead he could find. Meads was contacted by thousands of people via phone calls and letters, claiming to have information about the victim or her killer, but all of the leads were fruitless. The case, however, stayed unsolved, but the public's curiosity about it kept growing. The identity of the victim and the brutality of her murder captivated people. They were curious as to who killed her and why she was killed. The victim gained an unofficial nickname as the Lady of the Dunes, and the case turned into a national obsession. A Canadian woman claimed to have witnessed her father choke a woman in Massachusetts in the early years of 1972, and she shared this information with a friend in 1987. When police followed up on the tip, they were unable to find either the woman or her father. A different woman reported to the police that the composite sketch of the Lady of the Dunes resembled her sister who vanished from Boston in 1974. Police looked into this as well, but they produced no conclusive results. Additionally, detectives pursued a lead concerning Rory Jean Kessinger, a criminal who went missing. Kessinger had escaped from prison in 1973 and would have been 25 years old at the time of the murder. Although Kessinger and the victim bore some resemblance, the victim's DNA did not match Kessinger's mother's according to police reports. Even though the case went cold over the years, the police never gave up. They never gave up on their investigation or their quest to identify the victim. A CT scan of the skull was conducted in May 2010, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children used the scan images to produce another reconstruction. The Lady of the Dunes skeletal remains were sent to Othram, a private lab that specializes in DNA testing, in 2022. From the remains, Othram was able to create a DNA profile, which was subsequently provided to FBI agents. The FBI investigators performed a genealogy search using the DNA profile. In order to conduct this search, the DNA profile was compared to DNA samples provided by volunteers for databases like GEDmatch. The victim's distant relatives were identified by the FBI, thanks to an investigative lead obtained through a genealogical search. Following that, the FBI carried out additional research, which finally allowed them to identify the victim as 37-year-old Ruth Marie Terry. Although Ruth's identity provided some closure in the Lady of the Dunes case, it also sparked new inquiries, such as why Ruth was in Provincetown, who took her life, and what was the reason behind their extreme measures to hide her identity. Authorities chose to delve deeper into her past in order to provide answers to these queries, and on September 8, 1936, they found that she was born in Whitwell, Tennessee. In a mountainside shack, Johnny Terry and Eva Terry were her parents. Ruth moved from Whitwell to Livonia, Michigan to work at the Fisher Body Automotive Plant in 1957. She gave birth to her son Richard at this same period. The identity of the child's father is unknown. She was unable to take care of the child, though, because of her financial situation. In exchange for her debts being paid off, she permitted her boss, Richard Hanchett Sr., to adopt her son. Ruth relocated to California following the adoption's completion and left Livonia. Ruth tried to contact her son in 1972, but he was not ready to see her. He had overdosed on drugs and was unconscious for 18 days at that point. Luckily, he made it through the ordeal. Ruth married Guy Rockwell Moldavine, an antique thief from Reno, Nevada, in February 1974. The couple paid a visit to Ruth's family in Whitwell, Tennessee, for months before her death. Later, Brittney Novoglonsky, Ruth's grandniece, recalled that Ruth did not feel like herself when she was with Moldavine. She claimed that Ruth appeared scared of him and that he was domineering and possessive. The couple traveled to Chattanooga to see Terry's half-brother, Kenneth, and his wife, Carolee, following their visit with Ruth's family. Afterwards, Kenneth and Carol remember that Terry and Moldavine informed them that they were going to visit America in search of antiques. Kenneth also mentioned that as they were leaving, they talked about going to Massachusetts. Moldavine surprised Ruth Marie Terry's family in Tennessee by paying them a surprise visit in the late summer of 1974. Although he stated that Ruth was missing from their California home, he did not provide a reason for her disappearance. All he could say to them was that he had no idea where she was. After that, James, Ruth's brother, went to California to employ a private investigator to locate her. The investigator informed James and the other family members that Ruth had left the state voluntarily after joining a religious cult and that all of her possessions had been sold. Ruth was listed as deceased in obituaries in the years that followed, indicating that her family thought she had passed away. They never did hear from anyone confirming her passing, though. Muldoon became the main suspect in Ruth's death after information about his strange behavior and his enigmatic return to Tennessee became public. The police declared they were looking for additional details regarding Muldoon. They started a renewed investigation into his past and life. They found some startling things. Abram Albert Zadrinsky Muldoon and Sylvia Lily Silverblatt adopted Muldoon, who was born on October 27, 1923. Muldoon was a student at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1942 while residing in New York City. Because of a mastoid infection, he was unable to serve in the military during World War. Following his marriage to Joellen in 1946, Muldoon lived in Seattle, Washington, and New York, California, where he worked as a disc jockey. In 1956, the marriage ended in divorce. Muldoon wed Manzanita Eileen Manzarayan in Kootenai County, Idaho. 2 years later, in 1958, Dolores Ann Mearns, who was 18 at the time, was Manzanita's daughter from a previous marriage on April 1960. Both women disappeared inexplicably and Muldoon became the main suspect. He ran away from Seattle, but was caught by the FBI and charged with escaping the law in order to avoid testifying about their deaths. A freshly sealed septic tank contained fragments of the human body and tissue that law enforcement found during a search of the residences Muldoon had shared with Manzanita. Authorities, however, were unable to confirm that the remains are that of either of the two missing women. Muldoon was never charged because the King County prosecutor was reluctant to file charges in relation to their disappearances without a body. In King County, Washington, Muldoon married Evelyn Marie Emerson, not long after Manzanita and her daughter Dolores vanished. After Muldoon's second wife disappeared, Muldoon was found guilty of defrauding Evelyn's family of $10,000. He was given a 15-year prison sentence in 1961, but it was suspended in March 1962 in exchange for him repaying the money. Muldoon was also found to be the main suspect by the authorities in the 1950 murder of Henry Lawrence Baird and the abduction of Barbara Jo Kelly. On June 17, 1950, Baird, a 28-year-old bred truck driver, was last observed going on a date in Humboldt County, California with Kelly, a 17-year-old waitress. Baird's body was found face down on a beach close to Table Bluff the next morning. With the exception of his shoes and socks, he was completely nude after being shot in the back of the head. Under Baird's corpse, Kelly's personal belongings were discovered, folded and tucked in. Kelly herself was never found again. Whoever shot Baird is thought to have kidnapped her. Muldoon was formally identified as Ruth's murderer on August 28, 2023, but he had no way of paying for his crimes. At the age of 78, he passed away in March 2002. Although the mystery surrounding Ruth's death had been resolved, it would remain unclear how Muldoon killed her. Ruth's loved ones may never learn the whole truth about her death, but now that her murderer has been apprehended, they can at last feel some sense of closure. On March 17, 2015, a hiker walking the Lone Mountain Trail in Carson City noticed a shoe sticking out of the ground and alerted authorities, who found the buried body of a woman wrapped in a sleeping bag. Authorities estimated that the woman had passed away about a year before she was discovered. Investigators followed the usual procedure to identify the woman, but were unable to, and she became a Jane Doe. The Carson City Sheriff's Office brought the case to the DNA Doe Project in 2019 to attempt to investigate genetic genealogy to trace the Jane Doe's identity using DNA matches to build her family tree. After a complex series of laboratory processes to extract DNA and translate it into a workable profile for a comparison to the millions of records in the database's volunteer investigative genetic geogenealogists got to work in May 2020. The DNA Doe Project said since research began, more than 13 volunteers have worked to connect the matches with family trees, going back to ancestors born in the mid-1700s in England. It took a little less than a year to narrow the search to a single family in the vast tree. 3 of the 6 siblings were women. and this lead was offered to the investigating officers to follow up. In October 2022, a family member of the Jane Doe's ancestry DNA test was uploaded to gedmatch.com, a public database that can be used by law enforcement cases. After this DNA match, investigators confirmed that the Jane Doe is Joyce Rogers Annis, originally from Michigan. In addition to providing the critical lead to this identification, the DNA Due Project team also provided information about a man associated with Joyce who later confessed to burying her body on Lone Mountain. It turned out that 72-year-old Joyce passed away due to natural causes, and her husband, Edward Barton, buried her in the mountain. They were homeless and had no money for a funeral. Unfortunately, there is no way to prove or disprove Edward Barton's version of events, and the case is currently considered solved. Our case today takes us to Anchorage, a humble city in the state of Alaska in the USA. Known for its cultural sites, traditional crafts, and stage dances, Anchorage attracts many adventurers. This vibrant city also has many positives, such as its stunning scenery, no sales tax, and a friendly community. However, the city also has its downsides. Anchorage has consistently been in the top 10 most dangerous cities in the U.S. Being Alaska's largest city, criminals enjoy the advantage of traveling through the area virtually undetected. The violent crime rate in Anchorage is more than double the national average of the USA. And back in 2007, a selfless nurse's life was tragically snatched away from her in this very place. Mindy was born on July 16, 1955 in Brooklyn, Kings, New York to the couple Walter and May Schloss. She grew up in Syracuse, New York with her brother William Schloss. When Mindy was in her early 20s, she left home and settled in Seattle, where she met a man named Robert Conway, or simply Bob Conway. Mindy and Robert got along well and soon fell in love with each other. By 1980, the soulmates moved to Alaska. For a very long time, Mindy had wanted to pursue a career in nursing. She knew it was not going to be an easy job, but she was dedicated to devoting long hours to achieve something that really mattered to her. Mindy earned a bachelor's degree in nursing from the University of Alaska, Anchorage. She worked tirelessly to advance her knowledge and skills to improve her ability to serve her patients by earning a master's degree in public health from Johns Hopkins, an adult nurse practitioner degree from the University of Portland, and a psychiatric nurse practitioner degree from the University of New York, Stony Brook. Even though Mindy was doing well in her career, she had to go through many hardships. Her mother's passing in 1999, followed by her father's in 2001, took a huge toll on her. Thankfully, Robert was there to get her through this tragic time. In the years that followed, as she recovered, Mindy developed a passion for baking. Each year, she would eagerly wait for her favorite time of year, which was the berry picking season. Mindy greatly enjoyed traveling, whether it was to some exotic destination with Robert or wherever her work took her. She went happily. She served the public in various nursing positions in both rural and urban Alaska. And on top of that, she helped a wide variety of public health programs with her excellence in the nursing field, which was reflected in Mindy's exceptional professionalism and work ethic. During the latter period of her career, Mindy devoted her practice to helping take care of psychiatric patients. She was responsible and dedicated, always willing to give more than 100%. Her passion for life shone through every day, as she encouraged all the people to live their lives to their fullest potential. During all of Mindy's ups and downs, Robert was always by her side, planning his next holiday destination with Mindy to make sure she took breaks from her busy life. Just like any other day on Friday, August 3, 2007, Mindy arrived at her home on Cody Sark Street in Anchorage, Alaska, after a busy day at work. She was supposed to leave for Fairbanks to tend to some patients there in a few days and was preparing for that. But on Sunday, August 5, 2007, she missed her flight out of Anchorage and all of her appointments in Fairbanks. Jerry Yatt, one of Mindy's closest friends, tried to contact Mindy to figure out where she had been, but she never answered any of her calls. Bob, Mindy's boyfriend, also tried contacting Mindy and reached out for help to Jerry after failing multiple times. On August 7, 2007, one day after Mindy had failed to show up for work, Jerry called the Anchorage Police Department and officially reported her friend missing. Jerry and Mindy had been friends for 18 years. They first became acquainted while working together as nurses, and gradually they became best friends. In this busy field of work, they were each other's biggest supporters. They loved to spend time together and frequently went on small trips. They took care of each other, and Jerry would even look after Mindy's cat, Willie, when she had to go away. But everything changed in that 1 week of August 2007. On Tuesday, August 7th, 2007, Detective Pam Paranor arrived with her team at Mindy's house to conduct an investigation. She met with Jerry, who claimed that earlier when she arrived at Mindy's house to check on her, she found the house to be in complete disarray. Although there were any signs of a burglary or break-in, there were some details that Jerry found odd. It definitely was not in a state that Mindy would have left it, even if she was in a rush to leave for work. In addition to that, there was an empty bottle of wine. And knowing how restless Mindy's sleep was, the bed seemed to be too perfectly made. Taking a look around the house, detectives found that Mindy's car was gone too. Jerry told the detectives about Mindy's flight to Fairbanks, but pointed out that Mindy didn't like driving to the airport since it was so close to her place. And also she always thought that the parking there was expensive. The sudden disappearance wasn't making any sense to Jerry, but looking at the circumstances, she couldn't help but fear the worst. As Jerry grew more and more worried, the detectives decided to take a look around Mindy's neighborhood and ask people if they had seen anything, even minutely suspicious. After an initial round of questioning a few of Mindy's neighbors, the detectives were able to gather some information. Mindy was last seen at her home at about 7 p.m. on Friday, August 3rd, 2007. They also learned that Mindy had frequent arguments with her next-door neighbors who were known for being overly chaotic and rowdy. From the very beginning, detectives suspected foul play and thought that Mindy's long-term boyfriend, Bob Conway, might have something to do with her disappearance. However, after multiple rounds of interrogating Bob, he was soon dismissed as a suspect when he was able to provide a solid alibi, confirming that he hadn't seen Mindy that weekend. A few days later, after Bob was left off the hook, the detectives noticed some activity in Mindy's bank account. Authorities discovered that 2 $500 cash withdrawals had been made at 2 different ATMs from Mindy's account. CCTV footage from the ATMs, they found it wasn't Mindy who used her debit card to make those transactions. On August 9th, 2007, Mindy's car, a red 2000 Acura Integra hatchback, was found in the area of 4370 Old International Airport Road near Alaska Air Cargo. It had been parked strangely at a spot at the airport parking lot. Luckily, that spot had surveillance cameras, and the detectives were able to obtain the CCTV footage of the car being parked and left. When Mindy's car was searched, her purse was recovered, which had Mindy's wallet, house keys, and car keys, but her ATM card was still missing. Figured the man who left the car there and the man who made the withdrawals from Mindy's bank account must have been the same guy. To collect more evidence from the car, detectives made use of the scent transfer technology, a technology which is used to sense, transmit, and receive scent-enabled digital media. And through that, they were able to figure out that Mindy might have been sitting in the passenger seat. Even though the investigators were getting close to solving the puzzle, there were still a few pieces missing. With each passing day, detectives worked hours to hunt down Mindy's killer. However, they didn't have any potential leads. A few days after the investigation had started, Kathy Easley, one of Mindy's neighbors, eventually came forward with some crucial information about a suspicious man. She informed the detective about a 26-year-old man named Joshua Wade, who was another one of Mindy's neighbors. Kathy told the detective that Joshua acted very strangely when the detectives were conducting an investigation into Mindy's disappearance earlier that same year. To support her accusation, she even recalled an old incident she had with Joshua during the investigation period. Allegedly, when the detectives were working to locate Mindy, Joshua came up to Kathy and asked, listening to Joshua's eerie words, and didn't hesitate to inquire further. Kathy asked why he had a warrant out for him. Joshua fumbled with his words a bit and said that he had broken into a drug dealer's home on her by peeping through his window. And it was now when Kathy had decided to tell the police about the whole incident. The name Joshua Wade didn't ring a bell for the detectives. It turned out that Joshua had a history of violence and there were reports that Mindy had expressed discomfort around him. Based on recent findings, the detectives tagged Joshua as a prime suspect in Mindy's homicide, but the detectives still needed some concrete proof to formally charge him. Using the evidence gathered through scent transfer technology, the detectives focused on the scent from the driver's seat in Mindy's car. This was done to isolate the abductor's scent from the passengers. The FBI brought in the dogs to track the abductors, armed with samples of scent which most likely belonged to Mindy's abductor. Tracking dogs were typically used immediately after a crime had taken place. But since there was no evidence in the initial stages of Mindy's case, they were never brought in. Since the trail was weeks old, the dogs' jobs were made even more challenging. However, even after facing difficulties, the dogs traced the scent to Joshua Wade. Detectives were shocked by the dogs' findings, but sometimes these searches could be tricky. And so for confirmation, the FBI used the dogs again to track Mindy's bank card, which eventually led them to Joshua's house. Even though the search didn't find Joshua as he was on the run, evidence connecting him to the crime began to emerge. When the detectives conducted a search of Joshua's house, they found a jacket that matched the one seen on the surveillance footage from the ATM. Furthermore, the jacket also had a receipt for a bank transaction whose timestamp aligned perfectly with the one in the ATM footage. His phone was recovered as well, which had a picture of a gun similar to the one used to kill Mindy. The investigation took a shocking turn when the investigators looked further into Joshua's criminal history. He was eventually identified as an ex-convict who had previously been accused of another murder. Wade was once accused of murdering a 33-year-old woman named Della Brown in 2000. The case went to trial, but he was acquitted of the murder charge back then and was only convicted on one charge of tampering with evidence and given a 6.5-year sentence in 2003. After serving little more than 3 years, Joshua was released on probation on December 12, 2006. As the search for Joshua intensified, the police started receiving tips from the public, but still Joshua continued to evade capture, leading to a cat and mouse game. A photo of Joshua from the ATM was released as well, and an old girlfriend recognized him. Her name was Christina Greaser, and she claimed to have driven Joshua around. Tina Greaser, Christina's mother, never liked Joshua and didn't want her daughter to be with him. Christina decided to come forward when she found out some incriminating items in Joshua's backpack, which he had accidentally left behind in Christina's car. These items almost confirmed Christina and her mother of Joshua's questionable background. By the end of August 2007, the detectives were able to track Joshua down. She had gone back to Christina's apartment, asking her to drive him to a safe spot. When the detectives went to arrest Joshua, he held a few people as hostage in Christina's apartment building. The detectives were able to get everyone out safely, arrest Joshua, and take him into custody. When the detectives interrogated Joshua, he maintained a defiant attitude and smirked when confronted with evidence. Lisa, another one of Joshua's former girlfriends, eventually made a crucial confession. She revealed that Joshua had confessed to killing Mindy. With this information and Lisa's further cooperation, the detectives were now working to build a stronger case against Joshua. Joshua was finally charged with multiple state and federal charges, such as carjacking, theft, and bank fraud. On Thursday, September 13, 2007, a municipal worker doing site surveying work in the woods near Nick Goose Bay Road, about 5 miles from Wasilla, Alaska, came across a severely burned and decomposing body. He contacted the authorities right away. When the detectives arrived at the crime scene to investigate, they were taken aback looking at the gruesome conditions of the body. Using dental records, they were able to identify the victim as the 52-year-old Mindy Schloss. Later, an autopsy was conducted, which confirmed that Mindy was a victim of a homicide. The killer shot Mindy in the back of her head and tried to burn her body, but that wasn't even the worst part. Some other signs showed that Mindy had been gagged and bound with zip ties. A DNA sample was obtained from the crime scene and sent for forensic analysis. The results came back and confirmed a match between Joshua's DNA and the one found at the crime scene. This placed Joshua at the crime scene and also linked him to Mindy's ATM card usage. As the detectives intensified the search for Mindy's killer, her loved ones gathered for her cremation. It was Mindy's wish that she be cremated after her time in this world. Mindy's ashes were scattered across the Mediterranean Sea and no services were held for her. However, a few of Mindy's close friends and colleagues gathered together to celebrate her life and the joy she brought to them. Despite Joshua's best efforts to keep his ex-girlfriend, Lisa, from testifying, she finally revealed his confession. According to Lisa, Joshua had told her that he killed Mindy Schloss back in 2007 when he had recently been released from prison on probation. Joshua moved to Anchorage, Alaska, and into a house next door to Mindy's. Joshua was having a hard time with his life after prison. He was unable to pay the bills, and the fact that he was broke kept bothering him. Sometime in early August, Joshua had had a rough day at work. He returned home in a bad mood and broke into Mindy's house to rob her. Mindy was in her bathroom by the time. She couldn't process what was happening, but still tried to cooperate as much as she could. Joshua then tied her up with zip ties, took her ATM card and PIN information from her, and then shoved her in the car while she was still alive. After traveling more than an hour north of Anchorage, Joshua drove the car to a rural cul-de-sac in a wooded area in Wasilla, pulled Mindy out of the car, and shot her in the back of the head with a .45 caliber Glock. Once he made sure that Mindy was dead, he set her body on fire. Later on, he withdrew $1,000 from her bank account. Joshua was only 26 at that time. In 2010, during a dramatic trial, 29-year-old Joshua Wade entered a guilty plea in the 2007 killing of Mindy Schloss. Within a few hours, when the jury in Alaska's Superior Court was about to hand him a sentence, Joshua made a confession which shocked the entire courtroom. Joshua confessed that he also murdered the 33-year-old Della Brown in 2000 when he was only 19 years old. This resulted in a lengthy discussion by the jury. Both Mindy and Della were murdered years apart, and while Mindy had only been shot to death, Della had been beaten to death with a rock. Joshua was traveling through Sponard with his friends when he first saw Della and returned later to rob her. He stated that he found Della unconscious and in an intoxicated state. Joshua bashed her head with a rock before assaulting and murdering her. Later, he dumped her half-naked body in a filthy shed. Adam Bartlett, one of Joshua's defense attorneys, asked the state court to approve the plea deal reached with prosecutors, stating that Joshua had great remorse about his actions and had entered the plea deal sincerely. He added that to save his humanity, Joshua wanted the families of his victims to have closure. He added that to save his humanity, Joshua wanted the families of his victims to have closure. Although Joshua's defense lawyers claimed that their client had committed unforgivable sins and the horrific killings, they had come to see another side of him. According to them, Joshua was not the monster that people believed him to be. Joshua's attorneys provided a detailed description of his difficult life, highlighting how he endured trauma as a child. They even brought up an incident when Joshua had attempted to take his own life by drowning himself in a bathtub at the age of just 10. Because of the difficulties Joshua went through in his early life, he developed a drug addiction and soon followed his visits to psychiatric hospitals. Everything was now in front of the jury to look at. After a lengthy discussion, the jury announced the verdict. In addition to murdering Mindy and Della, the jury also found Joshua guilty on a federal charge of murder during a carjacking. Given that he stole Mindy's car, he was handed a sentence of 99 years. Although Wade did manage to evade the death penalty, he would only be eligible to get out on parole after he was 95 years old. For years later, in 2014, Joshua attempted to make a deal with prosecutors in exchange for being moved to a federal facility by confessing to 3 additional murders in exchange for a transfer to a federal prison where he could finish out his federal sentence. Joshua told the detectives that apart from Mindy and Della, he had also killed 3 other men. Although Joshua provided only vague details about those crimes, detectives suspected that he was hinting at the killings of John Martin in 1994, Henry Antiwaskaruk in 1999, and another unidentified man in 2000. Their suspicions were confirmed once Joshua himself confessed to murdering the 3 men. When Joshua was in his teens, he murdered the 30-year-old Henry Antiwaskaruk in 1999 and 38-year-old John Michael Martin in 1994, both of whom were mentally ill. Joshua claimed that he murdered his 3rd victim, who was never identified on the same night he murdered Della in 2000. Detectives reopened all those cold cases and took another look at them. John Michael Martin died from a single gunshot wound shortly after leaving a local village and restaurant. He was discovered by police in May 1994 near a cycling track that followed Northern Lights Boulevard. Martin had been frequently visiting the village inn for at least 5 years. He regularly came in during the day and night to meet his friends for coffee. But one tragic night, John left to walk home sometime around 2:30 a.m., and just 30 minutes later, he was found dead. John's sister claimed that he was jobless and suffered from schizophrenia. John's case remained cold for years after detectives exhausted all leads. In December 1999, Henry Antiwaskarok Spady was discovered in room number 221 of the Alaska Budget Motel in Fairview by a maintenance worker. The medical examination of Henry's body revealed that he had been killed 2 days before his body was discovered. Henry was staying at the motel East 4th Avenue in Gamble Street for a while at the time of the murder and was paying a weekly rent of $194. Henry, too, had a mental health issue. Joshua admitted that he killed his fourth victim, an unidentified man, on the same night he murdered Della in 2000. He claimed that the man was present when he killed Della in this Bernard shed. Joshua knocked him unconscious, shoved him in the trunk of his car, and drove out to a spot in a valley where he took his clothes off and shot him in the head 2 times with a shotgun. Joshua further added that killing that man didn't really bother him. After making his confessions, 34-year-old Joshua was transferred to a federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, after serving the initial years of his lengthy sentence in Spring Creek Correctional Facility in Seward. Joshua's sentence provided some closure for his victims' families. Even though they were long gone, their loved ones were here to witness justice. Mindy's best friend, Jerry Yett, said that Mindy's life was tragically cut short and she would be greatly missed and remembered as a person who was compassionate, kind, and always supportive. Joshua Wade, who is currently in his mid-40s, is serving his lengthy sentence at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana, USA. There have been no updates on the case of those 3 men that Joshua murdered before killing Mindy and Della. However, authorities stated that the investigation into the cases is still open. In 2015, 18-year-old Carl Farigian was living in Punta Gorda in Charlotte County, Florida. He was attending high school there and had just started his first job. Kyle was always smiling, friendly, and polite, with people saying he welcomed everybody with a cheeky grin. He loved the outdoors, enjoying long bike rides with his sister Keston. He was also an avid gamer, frequently staying up late into the night competing with people online. Keston said the pair were always close. Kyle looked out for her and was very protective. He was always in charge and he never let me forget it, she said. His stepfather, JJ, described him as mild-mannered, loving to laugh, play, and just have fun. Kyle stayed with his mother and stepfather on the weekends, and his father 50 miles away in Punta Gorda for the rest of the week. He had just got his first job at a local 7-Eleven store, and he was excited to be earning his own money and experiencing something new. Although he was outgoing with his family, he was quite shy around other people. He told his mother that he was happy his job was working the night shift so he could build up his confidence more without being overwhelmed by serving so many people. On October 31, 2015, Kyle got ready for his night shift. Another employee was scheduled to start at about 3:30 a.m., but until then, he was working in the store alone. Several hours later, 3:17 a.m., a panicked 911 call came in from a Punta Gorda resident. The 7-Eleven store was filled with smoke and a fire was spreading inside. After a closer look, the woman making the call said that she could make out a body on the floor, and it appeared that this was where the fire had been started. Police did wonder if it was possibly a Halloween prank of some sort, but just 3 minutes later when they arrived on scene, they realized it most definitely wasn't. After the fire had been extinguished, they found a charred body by the counter and blood covering the floor. The employee that was due to start her shift hurried over to the shop and met police. She had been outside ready to start, but after seeing the fire spreading inside, she had frantically started ringing Kyle to find out where he was. She knew he had been working alone that night and was praying that maybe he didn't make it in or was outside somewhere. Just as she was about to call the police, she heard the sirens. She then spotted a woman driving a dark-colored SUV out of the parking lot, and she was on her phone at the time. The employee tearfully told the police that she could tell it was the body of her coworker, Kyle. It was later determined that this was no accidental fire. Kyle had been shot to death before being satellite. As well as the community, even the police were in shock. Crimes like this were so rare and nobody could believe that something like this would happen. As cliché as it sounds, Kyle didn't have any enemies or even any issues with anyone. He was just going about his day, working his usual shift and living his life the way he normally would. Nothing appeared to have been stolen, so robbery was ruled out and what had happened made absolutely no sense to anyone. Although the store did have CCTV, the police were worried that the fire could have damaged the cameras, but set about trying to retrieve the data anyway. An $11,000 reward was offered and police were begging anyone that might have seen or heard something, no matter how small they thought it might be, to come forward. Officers managed to track down the woman who had made the 911 call. Her name was Chelsea and she was asked to come in and answer some questions. They wanted to know why she had left the scene rather than wait for the responders to show up. She said that she and her boyfriend had pulled in to get some cigarettes, but after seeing a body on fire and blood everywhere, they panicked. They didn't want to hang about, thinking the fire might start to spread, or whoever had done this was still around and might come for them too. Investigators weren't initially convinced, thinking it was just too coincidental to have just pulled up at the same time that all of this had happened. But after talking to her boyfriend Alex, they felt confident that the couple were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. And was clear the whole scene was just as traumatizing to the couple as it had been to everyone else. To the authorities' relief, some of the cameras inside were still working, and although the quality wasn't great, this was at least a starting point. On the first camera they checked, the footage was very blurry, but it showed Kyle looking down the aisles of the store, seemingly at someone, following them aisle to aisle. Without warning, at 3:12 a.m., a man who was covering his face was then seen walking out of the third aisle holding a gasoline can. He then pulled out a gun and shot Kyle in the head at point-blank range. Kyle dropped to the floor as another shot was fired at his head. The man then walked over and poured gasoline onto his body before grabbing a lighter from one of the displays and setting Kyle and the counter on fire. He then ran out of the store. It was so brutal, so brazen and so callous that officers were horrified and sat in stunned silence for a moment. They said it was disturbing to watch someone do something like that, with seemingly no motive as to why. This was not an accidental death. This was a planned-out execution, said Detective DeVault. The second camera showed a much clearer picture and it picked up the audio. It showed that 11 minutes past 3 was the time the man had entered the store and the door chimed as he walked in. There was no more sound for the next 78 seconds. Whoever the shooter was, he didn't say a word to Kyle as he was walking around inside. The next sound that can be heard is the 2 gunshots. The angle of this camera gave them a clearer picture of what the man was wearing and his size and build. He had camo trousers on as well as latex gloves, which at one point he started to take off. He also placed the gun on the floor, giving detectives a fairly clear image of that too. It was a long-barreled revolver. The suspect then fled the shop at 3:13. The cameras concluded that he was in there for less than 3 minutes, and it was unfathomable that this had all happened in such a short time frame. The shooter didn't go behind the counter and try and get to the money. He didn't steal anything from the shelves either. It seemed whoever had done this had come in with the intention of killing and nothing else. Kyle's family had now all traveled into Punta Gorda and spent most days just waiting in the station for any news. Kyle's stepfather said, "Even though he was my stepson, he was my kid, not knowing who did this to him. That's where the dad side of me was being eaten alive because I felt as a dad, I needed to know who did this to one of my children." But the police really were stumped and simply couldn't tell them anything. With no more CCTV outside the building and no witnesses, 48 hours with no answers felt like a lifetime for both the family and the investigating team. The search for evidence was widening. Dive teams came in, and detectives were asking for support from neighboring police teams. But when the manager of the 7-Eleven store asked to talk to the officers, their look would suddenly change. She said one thing in particular had been playing on her mind. Several weeks before anything happened, a man had come into the store looking to buy alcohol. She and Kyle were both at the counter when the man brought the beer over. The manager asked him to remove his ID from his wallet so she could take a look at it closely, but for some reason he refused, so she refused to serve him. That specific camera was the one that picked up the audio, and as the police watched it back, they could hear the man telling the manager he was going to get her fired. He demanded to know everyone's names before storming out. The manager, Lori, followed him outside to try and lock his license plate, but the man followed her back inside, shouting and being aggressive and threatening. As the situation started to escalate, Kyle picked up the phone to call 911. Before police arrived, the man had stormed out again. But fortunately, Lori had been able to get his number plate and she handed it to police that same day. A couple of weeks later, on September the 15th, despite now being banned from the store, the man came back in. Again, they refused to serve him and Lori phoned the police for a second time. The man then got into his car and drove right at Lori outside before speeding off. The vehicle was registered to a 28-year-old named Michael Russo, and he lived just around the corner from the 7-Eleven. Police issued him with a trespass warning, and he was told that if he returned to the store within 1 year, he would be arrested. Officers played the CCTV side by side, looking at the mannerisms and the size and build of Kyle's killer alongside Michael Russo. From what they could tell, everything, right down to the way he walked, was the same. This was the strongest lead so far, and a warrant was obtained so that police could search Michael's home. His house was full of various guns and ammunition. A white box of latex gloves was also found and numerous red gasoline canisters were located outside. Detectives also found a partially melted single latex glove in a bin. The specific gun they were looking for, however, was missing, and after forensically searching his house and car, top to bottom, there was no physical evidence linking him to the store. Although they felt fairly confident that Michael Russo was a suspect, they just didn't have enough to obtain an arrest warrant. 6 weeks would soon pass, and the grief-stricken community were banding together in a big way, and the reward for information was now sat at $20,000. As well as this, police were now seeking the help of the FBI, and enlisting new technology they believed might help them more when it came to the cameras inside. Detectives also spent the following weeks and months speaking with many people about Michael Russo, trying to build up a picture of who exactly he was. A lot of people came forward and said that they had previously accused him of threatening them for completely ridiculous and meaningless things. He seemed to be aggressive in his nature, completely flying off the handle for minor incidents. His neighbors also said that Michael was very open and proud of his extensive gun collection, often showing it off and telling everyone about each individual gun and where it came from. They said that one of his favorites was actually a long-barreled revolver, the exact same type that was used to kill Kyle. And what was even more interesting was that the neighbors said that since that fateful day back in November, they hadn't seen the gun again. At this point, the case was really as strong as it was going to get. And with this, 5 months after Kyle had been killed, Circuit Judge George Richards signed the warrant that police had been after for almost half a year. Michael Russo was finally arrested on charges of homicide and arson. The only thing officers really couldn't wrap their heads around was why. Apart from getting revenge for the fact that the past 2 times he went in, they had refused to serve him. There was absolutely no other motive for Michael doing what he did. Police believe that he went in with the intent to kill whoever was working and he didn't care who it was or how many people were there. Detective DeVault said that what happened that morning was nothing short of barbaric. He said, "This is not an ordinary person. This is a monster." Michael Russo pleaded not guilty, and in May 2017, his trial began. The team felt that the circumstantial evidence was really strong when it was all added up. And even though there was no physical evidence, both they and the prosecution knew it was a solid case. To everybody's relief, Michael Russo was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for second-degree murder with an additional 30 years for first-degree arson. His attorneys filed a motion for a new trial, but there is currently no update on the outcome of this. After the trial was over, it was announced that the now infamous 7-Eleven store would be closed down permanently. Kyle had a bright future ahead of him and was just enjoying the simple things in life that many 18-year-olds do. Going to school and his college dreams, working for the first time and hanging out with his friends and family. His life was cut so tragically short in a brutal and terrifying way that no one could ever have imagined, and for reasons that are nothing short of totally senseless. His mother, Bobby Jo, said that she misses how much he comforted her whenever things were tough, and he always assured her that everything would be okay. She said that she still expects to hear from him every day, a phone call or a text, but it feels like a punch in the gut every time she realizes this won't happen. His stepfather, JJ, said every morning they wake up they have to put a plan together for how they're going to approach the day and get through it. Every day brings new challenges and learning curves, sometimes expected, sometimes not. It really is a never-ending process for everyone that knew and loved Kyle. And JJ said they just do their best one day at a time. In May 2003, Tiffany Rowell and Rachel Colorudis, among many other people, proudly graduated from their high school. They were entering the next stage of their lives and had many summer plans with friends and family. Tiffany was off to become a social worker and Rachel was thinking of joining the military. Tiffany's boyfriend of 3 years, Marcus, also had a place at college, and his cousin Adelbert, who had recently moved to Clear Lake for a fresh start, had big plans too. After Tiffany's mother had died, her father remarried and moved out of the area. Tiffany stayed in the house so she didn't have to change schools so close to graduation. The next month and a half involved a lot of parties at Tiffany's, holding down jobs, saving up for college, and spending as much of the summer together as possible, before they all went their separate ways for a while. Late afternoon, July 18, 2003, police received a call from 2 neighbors who had gone to visit Tiffany. They had walked into her house and found a traumatizing scene, one that no one could have predicted, for people lay dead. The floor and walls were covered in blood, and it was obvious that they had all been deceased for several hours already. It was a shocking sight, for even the most tenured of police officers. The victims were 18-year-olds Tiffany Rowell and Rachel Colorudis, Tiffany's boyfriend 19-year-old Marcus Priscilla, and Marcus' cousin 21-year-old Adelbert Sanchez. Tiffany, Marcus, and Adelbert had all been shot to death, and although Rachel had been shot multiple times, she had died of blunt force trauma to her head, and her skull was completely shattered. There was no forced entry. The TV was still blaring, and the way the group had been found indicated it was a total ambush that had happened in a mere matter of seconds. Rachel was found on the floor with her hand near her phone. She had managed to hit the 911 buttons to try and call for help, but before any call could go through, she was hit over the head, likely with a gun, and died. There was a clump of hair in her right hand, and she had been shot at least 12 times. Tiffany and Adelbert were on the recliners, their legs stretched out while they had been relaxing watching television, and Marcus was found behind the seats on the floor. Over 40 bullets had been fired in the house, and there was a mixture of 2 different shell casings. No guns were found at the scene, but police could tell that one was a 9mm and one was a .38 caliber. So investigators felt confident they were looking for at least 2 people involved, maybe even more. As the media got hold of the story and news began to spread, Rachel's father George recognized the address on television and headed straight over with his wife. The cameras picked up the heartbreaking moment. He pleaded with the police to let him in, but as it was now a crime scene, it was simply not allowed. They both collapsed to the ground, waiting for someone to tell them something, but knowing deep down they wouldn't see their daughter alive again. It was disturbing and shocking that something like this could happen in broad daylight, in a neighborhood where very little went on. Former classmates of Tiffany said that her home had quickly become known as a party house, with drinking and drugs, and often lots of people coming in and out, especially now that it was summer break. So they wondered if maybe an alcohol or drug-fueled party had become really out of control. That's not what this particular day had been. The 4 were the closest of friends, and for all intents and purposes, it had just been a very casual afternoon for them, watching television and eating food. Friends, students, and neighbors gathered together for vigils, and a sense of unease hovered over everyone. 18-year-old Tiffany always had the biggest smile on her face. As well as wanting to go into social work, she was a talented actress and loved any chance to perform. Rachel Colorudis also loved the arts and creative writing, and was very popular in school due to her kind nature. People said that she too was always smiling, happy and fun to be around. Marcus' stepfather said Marcus loved nothing more than working on his car and spending time with his family and Tiffany. He had been finishing a course for an automotive technology certificate and wanted to pursue a business degree. His cousin Adalbert had moved to Clear Lake to get away from violence on the north side and had only been there for a couple of weeks before he was killed. He loved making music and planned to go to college to study computer technology. People could not believe that something this brutal could happen to them, and this seemingly random crime had rattled the community. Sadly, there really were no witnesses. No one had heard any gunshots. The houses were very separated, and police said lots of people had their air conditioning and fans on, which could have blocked out the noise. But a couple living nearby had seen something they thought might be relevant. They had seen a very young man and a woman walking down the street at about 2:30 p.m. that day, and to the best of their knowledge, they hadn't seen them before. They were dressed all in black. The woman was wearing a bandana, carrying a big, black bag, and the neighbors described her as very pretty with big eyes. The witnesses gave the best description they could to the renowned forensic artist Lois Gibson, who worked with what they could remember, putting together a potential profile. But whether these people were in any way linked was really unclear. Just 2 hours later, Lois had completed the sketches. George, Rachel's father, started working nonstop to try and raise money, so they could afford to put the sketches out on billboards, and spent most of his time going door to door handing out flyers. Early on, rumors began to swirl that Marcus had been involved in dealing drugs, and maybe this was behind the ambush. It was also alleged that Marcus' family had connections to the Mexican mafia, and perhaps the other three had been collateral damage to a completely unrelated thing. A close friend of Tiffany's said, "I know Marcus was messed up with some bad people, but Marcus's aunt said he struggled, but he succeeded. No matter how hard he was trying, he was doing the best to do good." One detective said they were all very young, very immature, and on their own for the first time. The four may have exercised bad judgment at times, but certainly didn't deserve what happened to them. Officers simply couldn't find anything to solidify the claims about the mafia, and this theory was eventually ruled out. Police did wonder, however, if drugs were involved somehow, but they just didn't have anything yet that pointed to that, as both drugs and cash were found at the scene in plain view. So why hadn't they been stolen? The attack had been so ruthless and felt so personal. Police then started to wonder if it was someone close to the group. Amongst her multiple shots, Rachel had been shot in the crotch area, and psychiatrists wondered if this was a sign of sexual envy or jealousy. But they were ruling people out at a rapid speed, rather than adding any suspects to the list. There was simply no one they could link to the group that would have any motive to do this. Time was slowly ticking by, and investigators had no more than they did when they first started. As the weeks turned into months, the months soon turned into years. Their confidence in catching whoever was responsible was dwindling. Fast forward to the summer of 2006, almost 3 years to the day after the shootings. After following leads that went nowhere and interviewing hundreds of people, police finally had a breakthrough. An anonymous tip came in via Crime Stoppers. The person on the end of the phone said they had seen the billboard and gave the police 2 names. The first was Christine Paolilla and the second was Chris. The tipster had met Christine in rehab as she was battling a heroin addiction. She had recently split from this mystery man called Chris and was seemingly trying to turn her life around. While in rehab, she made a comment about her ex-boyfriend shooting up a house and killing a group of people, and she had also participated. He didn't know if the story was true or if it was the drugs talking, but after seeing the billboard for himself, he decided to call in. A look into the name Christine Paolilla told the police a lot. It turned out that Christine had gone to Clear Lake High School alongside Tiffany and Rachel, and the connections started to be made. Those in Christine's life said that she had had a tough time in school and was subjected to relentless bullying and attacks from classmates. Her mother and stepfather said that she had been diagnosed with alopecia when she was very young and began wearing wigs, which were frequently ripped off her head by other students. Her mom, Lori, said she had poor vision, so she had what I guess most folks would know as Coke bottle glasses. This, as well as her wearing wigs, meant she faced ridicule on a daily basis. Her mother said that one day Christine came home from school and said, "Mom, I made two new friends who were the sweetest girls I ever met, Rachel and Tiffany. None other than Rachel Colorudis and Tiffany Rowell. People said that the two almost took Christine under their wings, forming a genuine and tight friendship. Rachel and Tiffany started looking out for her, trying their best to protect her from the bullying. Christine's mom said, "Couldn't speak highly enough about them. How much fun they were, how loving they were, how they had so much fun. Every minute they spent together was lively and fun, and they laughed all the time, and I saw such a change in her personality." Rachel's father also knew of Christine and said Rachel was the kind of person that always looked out for the underdog, always tried to help others. Rachel even kept a photo of Christine in her purse. On the back of the picture, Christine had written, "Damn, we've had some crazy memories. I love you." The three teens would often write notes back and forth to each other in class. And Lori recalled that Christine trusted them both so much, she felt okay without the wig on, which is not something she did with many of her friends. The trio would spend hours after school doing each other's makeup and trying on different wigs, having fun, but also making Christine feel comfortable and confident. The girls pushed Christine to try new things and find her creativity. And with this, Christine's confidence began to grow and she was really coming into her own. She got a huge boost when she was voted Miss Irresistible by the student body at Clear Lake High School. She finally felt like she was leaving her past behind. Christine soon met Chris Snyder. He was 2 years older than her and the pair struck up a friendship. Lori said she immediately disapproved of this, but said her daughter wouldn't hear anything bad said about him. Chris ended up serving time for armed robbery, and when he got out, he went straight back to Christine, who was now 16 years old. Christine said that she felt bad because nobody wanted to be associated with him, and knowing how this felt, she stuck by him. They soon became romantically involved, and Christine had become more and more distant from her family. Lori said Christine clung on to him for reasons she didn't understand, despite him often joining in with the bullying. Chris was using a lot of drugs at the time, and before long, so was Christine. Her parents spoke to lawyers and the police, even trying to get a restraining order against him, but Christine was now almost 18 years old and was making her own decisions. Her stepfather said she felt she was going to be able to fix him no matter what he did. But others said that the toxicity came from both of them, with people often seeing Christine hitting him and shouting and fighting in public. Although this relationship was already on a downward spiral, two people that seemed to be constantly positive and have good energy in her life were Rachel and Tiffany, who stayed just as close to her throughout her relationship with Chris. On the day the group were found dead, Lori said Christine had come home in floods of tears, crying through most of the night. She said she was so upset she couldn't attend their funerals. So, with the police knowing all of this, it begged the question, why would someone that was so close to the victims do something like that? How could Christine possibly have been involved? The only person that could answer that question was her. And officers started searching for Christine Paolilla and Chris Snyder. The hunt for Chris proved harder as he was not living at his last known address. But, thanks to ATM and bank records, Christine and her husband Justin were located. They were hauled up in a San Antonio motel, having lived there for almost a year. When officers announced themselves and entered, they walked into what they described as one of the most disgusting things they had ever seen. Used needles, rubbish, food, vomit, and drugs littered the floor. Blood and bodily fluids covered the walls and furniture. They said the smell was unlike anything, and the state of Christine and Justin was quite shocking. Wearing blood-stained clothes and covered in track marks, just before noon on July 19, 2006, Christine Paolilla was placed under arrest. Police said it was clear that the pair were so deeply in their addictions, it was likely a matter of time before they died. For the last 9 months, they had been living in the same room, spending every bit of Christine's inheritance money on drugs. Christine told police she was living off of crackers and spending around $500 a day on heroin, but this amount sometimes reached over $1,000. Justin said Christine hadn't left the room once. Christine's police interview began just before 3 p.m., and over the next few hours, the detective begged her to tell the truth. She admitted to driving Chris to the home that day, but said the murders were all his idea. The plan was to buy drugs from someone inside, Christine said she waited outside in the car before they both drove away. But when Chris said he had forgot something, the pair went back. She initially said that again she stayed outside, hearing no gunshots and seeing nothing wrong. She said she only realized something had happened when he came out holding a gun. After this happened, they drove off and she clocked in to start her shift at Walgreens just 30 minutes later. The police weren't convinced that this was down to just Chris. Neither were the experts that had analyzed the crime scene. They were still standing by their theory that this was a jealous rage or something to do with sexual envy on Christine's part. Although Rachel and Tiffany had befriended Christine, it was still entirely possible that maybe she didn't believe they were being genuine and wanted to punish them, or her anger at being treated so badly in school had poured over and she had taken it out on them. Officers were trying to get as much information out of her as they could, but as the interview drew to a close, started to grow weaker and more sick. She was transported to Santa Rosa Hospital, where she informed doctors that she was used to taking heroin every 10 to 15 minutes, and that she hadn't had any since that morning. After she had been given methadone and morphine, they carried on the interviews inside the hospital, but Christine was still pointing the finger at Chris. She was then put on a plane and flown out to Houston before being placed in a jail cell. A final videotaped interview commenced just before midnight. Her story had now changed. She then said she watched in horror as Chris beat Rachel to death. And according to Christine, he had threatened to do the same thing to her and her family if she told anyone what had happened that night. Police were satisfied that she had finally, at least, placed herself at the scene. They were still looking for Chris and visited his last known address, his parents' house. They told his family that there was a warrant out for his arrest. They began a search of the property. In his father's bedroom was a little safe which contained 2 guns. Both matched the 2 types that they were looking for. But by this point, no one had seen Chris in over a week. Detectives looked at his MySpace page and phone records, which led them to Greenville, South Carolina, but Chris had already learned about the manhunt before police could even find him. Testing the guns soon linked them back to the crime scene, but before they could place Chris under arrest, his decomposing body was found in some woods. He had taken an overdose of pills. It is thought that someone had tipped him off about the pending arrest, and he had taken his own life before they could find him. There was now only one person left to talk to, and that was Christine's husband, Justin. He said that Christine had inherited some money after her father passed away, and the couple had bought a small condo with it. Soon after they started living together, a new story about the anniversary of the unsolved murders came out. Christine called Justin in to watch, asking if the billboard picture looked like her. He said Christine broke down and admitted to going to the house to steal money and drugs. She said she was a willing participant, and when Chris started shooting, she didn't hesitate to join in too. Justin also said that Christine had told him that it was her who beat Rachel to death with the gun, not Chris. He said that Christine told him Rachel was crying, asking why over and over, but she didn't stop until she was sure Rachel was dead. Justin said he was completely shocked and scared, but the couple moved out of the condo and went on the run. It later turned out that the anonymous tip that had been made to Crime Stoppers was actually Justin himself. Christine Paolilla was charged with first-degree murder, and she entered a plea of not guilty. In a pre-trial hearing, Christine's defense team moved to suppress all 3 recorded statements. Although she had been advised of her Fifth Amendment rights before each interview, they argued that her statements were technically involuntary because of the medication she had taken and because she was suffering from opioid withdrawal. But this motion was denied, and the court later said Christine was lucid and capable of understanding the warnings given to her and the nature of her statements. A couple of years later, the now 22-year-old's trial got underway. The defense advised that Christine did not testify. They showed her confession tapes reiterating Christine's statement, saying that it was Chris that had killed the group while she hid. The jurors watched her videotaped statement in which she told police that Chris was responsible for everything and that she was afraid of him. But the prosecution fired back saying, over 1,100 calls are made from her to him and him to her. If you are so deathly afraid of someone, what are you doing on the phone with them for over 1,000 phone calls? Dr. George Glass, a psychiatrist testifying for the defense, said that her heroin addiction could not be overlooked. She was in withdrawal at the time she spoke to the police and was saying anything she could to get drugs to relieve the pain. Her lawyer said she's upset. She totally understands the grief of the families, her friends, the ones who were killed. She only wishes they could understand that she didn't want any of it to happen. But she understands their grief. Rachel's mother disagreed and said, "I couldn't take my eyes off her. I really hoped to see something in her eyes in the way of remorse. And it was unbelievable. She never shed a tear unless it was for herself." The prosecution said there was plenty that pointed towards her being involved directly. And the fact that she had started her shift at work just half an hour after the ordeal, instead of phoning the police, showed that she was no victim. Her statements were inconsistent, and she had already admitted to 2 people, one of which was her husband, that she had actively taken part of her own accord. The prosecution called her denials and blaming everything on Chris a tired and pathetic tactic. Their star witness was actually her husband Justin. But the defense argued that Justin's account could not be trusted. They said he was focused purely on money, staying with Christine for her inheritance, and cashing in on the Crime Stoppers' reward by making up a lie. But the jury disagreed. After just 3 hours of deliberations, Christine Paolilla was found guilty. She was 17 at the time of the murders, which meant she would not face the death penalty. She was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 40 years to serve. She will be eligible for parole in 2046, when she will be 60 years old. More than 5 years after the murders back in July 2003, the families of the victims said that they felt the guilty verdict would finally allow them to begin moving on with their lives. Christine has filed many appeals since her conviction, but all of them have been denied. Houston Police Sergeant Brian Harris said that he believes that Christine still does not own her part in the crime. For her to truly come to grips with what she has done, she has to acknowledge that there's a darkness in her soul, he said. Christine's stepfather Thomas said, "I'm very sorry for these families and their loss. The guy who did this is dead. He was very, very bad. He was a predator. My daughter is paying for someone else's sins. My daughter doesn't deserve this. My daughter is a victim too." It's hard to know exactly what happened that fateful afternoon and why it did. Police say there were 6 people at the scene. 5 of them are now dead and 1 of them isn't talking. So with this, it is likely that the full truth will never be fully known. The aftermath of that awful day is still widely felt, with Rachel's father calling it an earthquake for the families and community. Marcus' stepfather said, "Our lives are very different now. We see things differently than before, and we know that we will never again feel the sense of hope that we used to feel." Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.